Thank you very much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. I'll see a few of you on the session today will probably know who I am, and we've probably met at several different events or worked together in a different area within Live Well over the last 20 years that I've been with them. So yes, my name's Sandra Crocker, and I'm currently a health improvement practitioner with the Wellbeing Team. I've got several sort of work streams, so as well as talking to people about health promotion and staying well, I attend events, I go around to some of the mental health units, I go across the hubs across the city. So, lots of things going on in our sort of raising awareness of hoping to keep everybody healthy and happy. So, like Charlie was saying, we're going to take a look today at our mindful eating triggers. And when we're thinking about mindful eating, we're going to think about what that means to you. So it can mean very many different things to different people. It's just given us an insight really into the complex, not just physical but psychological aspects of our eating habits and routines. And I'm sure that throughout the session there will be probably questions you'll want to ask, or there may even be some interesting facts and things that you want to share as we connect with each other on this session today. Just go forward, as you know, the One You service is about helping people, supporting people with healthy eating, moving more, stop smoking, drinking less, falls prevention, and we do our health checks, and we also we do our Know Your Numbers now, which we take out the Tanita scales and offer people a chance to sort of get a scan of where they're at with their weight and everything else going on physically for them regarding their fat, muscle, and fitness levels. We also incorporate in the Know Your Numbers, we do blood pressures as well. So, if you're needing any sort of help with people, if you're working with people that might need any of those services, please get in touch with us. So the idea of the workshop today is, how we can all, as practitioners and in our own, daily lives, think about our weight journeys. Nearly everybody I meet is very fixated on their weight. They're more fixated on what the scales say sometimes than whether they're healthy. So sometimes it's helping them to find out it's a bit of a balance between both. But as we age and head towards our more senior years, keeping ourselves healthy, can take a bit of doing. So there's lots of things we do alongside talking to people. We offer our wellbeing walks, we do walk and talks, we do drop-in sessions for people who want some advice. So so that's a little bit of background about what we're going to be thinking about today. So we'll just move on. So just in general housekeeping, as Charlie said, please feel free to keep your cameras on, or if you need to and you feel more comfortable, it's okay to not have your camera on. It is good to keep your microphones off if you're not talking. Obviously, when you are, somebody will shout out you're on mute. That very often happens to me. So don't worry about that. But it does help us to sort of reduce the background noise. Please feel free, if you're happy to and it's appropriate, to share your experiences when there's a chance for group discussion. And as always, as we know as practitioners, please be respectful and compassionate when sharing things with others. And just another reminder, this is being recorded today. And there will be room at the end of the session, as Charlie said, for any questions. Moving on. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to think today about mindful eating and how we can use the mindful eating cycle as a tool to maintain a healthy weight. It's not something that comes easy. I've been in this role now for about 5 years, and it is something I'm mindful of. I can't say I always put it into practice, but it does. It is really good to have that awareness of how we can mindful eat. Hopefully we can identify some of the triggers for overeating or eating less healthy foods that people struggle with. And we'll look at some techniques of maybe how we can overcome these. And we'll explore tools such as the hunger scale. Some of you may have come across that before, or you may not have, but that's quite a visual. It's a really good visual tool to help us connect with why we're eating. And an emotional diary eating, because as we know, lots of emotions can trigger why we're eating. So we're just going to think about those areas today. Any questions, or if you want to stop for anything or pause anything, just pop your hand up. Not a problem. So just moving on, thinking about why do we need to eat? Obviously, we all need to eat because we need to eat to survive. Our body needs to eat because that's our way of fueling ourselves. And as you will see on the screen, we've got the analogy of, if we think of a car, if we don't put the right fuel in, we know what can happen. Chugga chugga stop, and we're not going to leave the forecourt of the petrol station. But also alongside of that, we need to think about the maintenance. We need to think about, we put the oil in that it needs and we keep it topped up with the water to stop it overheating and just to generally keep it running efficiently. So if we sort of connect with that line of thinking and think of ourselves as using food to fuel ourselves, that just gives you an indication of where we're coming from in this session today. Unfortunately, we know it's not as simple as that. The reality is there are a lot of reasons why we eat. And that will be different for everybody. It's one of the things that makes us all unique. Our eating habits and routines vary from, day to day, person to person. So we hope that today's workshop will just give you some ideas when you're thinking or you're talking to people, or maybe apply it to yourself about how to think about food in a less complicated way, but in a way that's going to help us to benefit and improve our health. Any questions so far? Okay, moving on. So what is mindful eating? Well, we know that mindfulness is sort of around a lot these days to sort of help us to sort of think about what's going on in the present, where we are, what we're doing, sometimes to distract ourselves from lots of pressures around us. But today we're going to be thinking about not just what we eat, but how we eat. When we think about, leading a healthy lifestyle, losing weight, we often focus on what we're eating. And I'm sure for, a few of you on the call, you may be able to associate if you think, right, Monday's here, I'm on plan today, I'm going to be really good, I'm not going to have anything unhealthy. And you're really, you're focused and you're on it, and then you get into the office and somebody's brought in a lovely homemade cake, or somebody's turned up with nice breakfast bats, and you think, oh well, I'll start tomorrow. So we're just going to think on you know, what we're eating when we're eating. Of course, this picture is going to look very, very different for everybody. So it's just focusing in today, I guess, because you guys are on this session today, about what this means to you. And then maybe when you're having those connections and conversations with other people, you'll be able to bring some of this into those. Now, a lot of what we do is we don't always recognize how we are eating. And, for a lot of people, how we eat can be part of how we were brought up with our eating habits, routines, how whether we sit around a table now and we eat, or we eat on the go, or we've got our dining room table as our working from home set up now, so all our food's on our lap in front of the television. And are we distracted when we're eating? Are we still looking at our computer? Are we multitasking? Are we watching the television? Are we looking at our iPads? Are we, what are we doing? Do we eat quickly? Do we eat slowly? So it's just about really thinking about how we're eating. And we're going to look at lots of different things about the way we eat. But just for now, we're thinking about how we're eating. So mindful eating helps us to actually build our awareness of how we are eating. It opens up that opportunity to appreciate food more and to make a better connection with it. Do we ever consciously think about connecting with food? Do we ever think about appreciating it? Sometimes we really fancy that bar of chocolate, and so, oh, really great, but it's gone within a matter of seconds, and then you're busy, and then 5 minutes later you're thinking, oh, I'll just have a biscuit with my cup of tea. So it's just getting you to think a little bit about, how food has really sort of evolved to be such an important thing to us, and how we reach for it, and how we're managing it. Some studies suggest that mindful eating can help support emotional eating and binge eating. And that, obviously can promote a healthier relationship with food. And it's funny, really, isn't it? Because every time I sort of mention that, a relationship with food, it wasn't something I consciously thought about until I come into this role, really. Food was just food to me. I never took any notice, really, of how I eat or why I eat or anything. So it can sometimes help us to regulate our appetite as well. It can aid digestion, and it can make eating a more enjoyable and pleasurable experience. And what we're consciously always promoting is it's not restrictive. There's really no foods off the table. It's about appreciating and enjoying your food, whilst all the time thinking about how you can feed yourself and stay well and healthy. A little bit later on, we're going to be looking at a video, and it's very short. It's only about a minute long, I think. And like I say, it's called the Hunger Scale. So we'll have a look a bit about that later on. And there's also a mindful eating video that you can find on YouTube, and we'll send out the link to that after the session to everybody. So moving on. We're just going to move on now to the mindful eating cycle. I don't know if everybody's aware of the mindful eating cycle. But before we look at some of the practical ideas to start mindful eating, we're going to just explore this a little bit. And mindful eating cycle, as you can see, will help us to look at the different areas. So we know that why do I eat? What are my triggers? Um, am I hungry? Am I emotional? Am I stressed? Have I forgotten I've eaten already? And then when we look at when, we're looking at meal times, when you're hungry, bored, or out of habit. When do I eat? Is it meal times, or is it because I'm hungry, bored, or I'm feeding my emotions? And that really, when you're thinking about when, for a lot of people, they talk about keeping a food diary. I think for some people, if they just generally kept a list of every time they reached for something, their list would be quite big. And this came about me thinking particularly, and I am saying this is something I was made aware of by I was talking to a lady and she wanted to lose some weight, and she made a note of how many times she went to her fridge between 6 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. And she said, I kid you not, it was 36 times. She said, if somebody had said that to me, she said, I'd have said you're joking. So now what she does is she just keeps her snack box in her fridge, and she puts the time. She's got a sticky note on her fridge, and she actually writes the last time she went in there, and she won't open the door until it's at least a half hour and a half. And I thought, well, that's really good, but it's not something I've ever thought about doing. I don't think I would even consider doing it, to be honest, because I don't keep much in my fridge, to be honest. I don't keep many chocolate snacks, but if I go to my biscuit bin with all my, chocolate biscuits, all the snacky biscuits that I really enjoy, I could count up a couple of, or maybe a few times that the lid comes off that one. So, thinking about why are we doing that? If you've had your tea and that's supposed to keep you going now till breakfast, what's going on here? So just moving on. Now we're thinking about what, and this is where, a lot of us can really associate our sort of letdown with food. Is is there something tempting? Is it comfort food? Are we, thinking about what our body needs, or just wanting something because it's become a habit and because it's become part really of our routine? So for a lot of people, and I, to be honest, I've recognized in myself, I eat most of my meals in front of the television. So when I'm not eating now, it's almost like I'm having a constant battle with my brain, trying to tell it I don't need to be eating. I can just watch the telly now, because it's just having a habit. It's just thinking something's missing while you're sat there. And it's really good to just get to know yourself and think about how these things that maybe you've never thought of, actually you can see happening. So then when we move on to how do I eat? A lot of people, again, we don't really think about this. Are we distracted? Are we eating quickly? Are we eating secretly? Um, you know, and there might be lots of reasons why there are, all those three headings can cause you to eat. But, for some people, do they think, when did I last eat and sit down with the family? Um, what's my routine like? Do I work shift work? For a lot of people, if we go back a few years, well, quite a few years, we used to have a bit of a routine of breakfast, lunch, and dinner or tea, whatever whatever language you use. And that would be quite structured, where I think for people that I meet now, they tend to just break their day into a morning, an afternoon, and an evening. So that, for a lot of people, they vary it. They don't see breakfast as breakfast. Some people don't want to eat in the mornings. They eat very late in the morning, and it's a bit of a brunch. And then when we think about how much do we eat, we're thinking about, our portion sizes. Do we eat until it's all gone? And do we eat until we feel uncomfortable? Which we'll look at when we look at the hunger scale. It's very hard sometimes, if somebody else is cooking for you, or you're not really in control of your portion sizes, you know, we just tend to eat it. We've got the example now of getting value for money when we go for a carvery. One of my ladies said she doesn't really apply the cost. She just wants the challenge of how much she can get for her money's worth, and how much she can balance on her plate, whether that's more than a husband or a partner. And you have to stop and think sometimes, because I think we can all relate to that when we go to these places and there's a meal deal on. We don't look at the calories. We don't think about, oh, I'm healthy eating today. We're just thinking, you know, let's see how much we can get for our buck, really. And so moving on, we think about where. Now, when we're thinking about the where, we're thinking about where does our energy go? So we're thinking about energy there in calories, because we do know that if we can have a really good association between the intake and the output of calories, we do tend to feel more healthy. We've got a balance going on, because there are lots and lots of different plans and different food support, commercial services. Now we've got the injections, and whatever works for people works. But actually, the one thing that we all recognize is that when people are losing weight through whatever is working for them, whatever plan they are following or whatever they are choosing to do, it's usually the result of eating healthier, which means less calories, less fat, less sugar. And so therefore, if we're busy in our day, and we can reduce that calorific intake by what we're currently taking on board, we can usually see some results. We have to be a little bit mindful as well, because for everybody who's going on a weight loss journey, we have to take into consideration, underlying health conditions, medication related to weight gain. There's lots of things that can be making it more difficult for people to lose weight, but probably not impossible. How's everybody feeling so far? Because I feel like I'm just talking and talking and talking, which I am, but that's what I'm good at. I feel that's why I'm living my dream job, because I get paid to do what I do best, and that's talk. So as long as everybody's happy and not got the earache yet, we'll continue on. So just thinking a little bit now about what are as human beings triggers, but what are your as individuals triggers for eating? So the whys and the whens and the whats. So it is important to get to know your triggers and learn to understand why. So if we have a think about these, let's just think about each of those categories. And if people are happy to unmute or put something in the chat bar, perhaps we could come up with some ideas for each category. Would anybody like to suggest what an environmental trigger might be to why we're eating?
Being near office buns was one of the suggestions.
Yeah. Yeah. Feel free to unmute yourselves and just shout out. Limited choice at canteen, yeah. Feeling stressed, yeah. We have a treat drawer in the office. Lots of
I think
takeaway
stress is
food.
quite a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's we're amazing, really, aren't we? As humans, because if you think about food, it's somebody's birthday, great, lovely, let's all go out and eat, let's have cake. If you think about when somebody's sad, what's going to cheer me up? Come on, I'm going to take you out for a meal. Let's go down and have a coffee and a bun. Let's get the sweets out. Let's go to the chocolate drawer in the office. Let's, and it really is our go-to thing, isn't it, food? It really is our go-to. It's the answer to everything, really, except for us being healthy. Well, that's what it feels like for me. If I'm happy, I eat. If I'm sad, I eat. Um, Somebody's put in about lots of takeaway food shops. Yeah, and not just lots of takeaway food shops. We've got shops everywhere. We've got the express shops. We've got the your sort of wholesalers around us now. We've got shops that are open 24/7. We've got places where we can consume food, open all hours of the day and night. And let's be honest, we haven't even got to leave home now, have we? We can just call up the Just Eats or something and get it all delivered now at a very good cost. Takeaways takeaway vans that come to the office, exactly. So think about those at the moment as a trigger for the environmental, and those are the things that perhaps stop us from making our own snack box up because we know the van's going to be in. I won't buy a chocolate bar on my way to work today because I know we've got some in the drawer at work. Oh, somebody's birthday today, we're having buns. And it's almost like that environment is set up really to sabotage us. And again, because no foods are off the table, it's just about us being mindful. And so it's really good when you think about all the different things that you've put in the chat bar and you're thinking about the stress. Now, when we think about healthy food can be more expensive at times and less available quickly. I hear that a lot from people, but there are some really good tips and recipes depending on people don't need to think about healthy food in a way that's all green leaves and a bit of hummus. Let's think about chips, egg, and beans. If we minimize the fat we're using for that meal, our eggs are giving us protein, our potatoes are giving us carbohydrates, and our beans are giving us fiber. So that can be, if it's cooked in the right way, quite a healthy meal. It's when we use a lot of those unsaturated fats. So, because, if we want to fry an egg with fry light, it's an egg, but it's not quite the same as a fried egg that comes out all greasy from the burger van that people, really like more of. So when we're thinking about healthy foods, just think outside the box a bit about what contributes to us being healthy. And to be healthy, as the World Guide plate, which we haven't got today, but shows us there are 5 food groups that we all need. And that's our fruit, veg, and salad, our proteins, our carbs, our dairy, and some fats, unsaturated as opposed to saturated. So just moving on to the next slide. Here are some of the examples of the things that really can sort of find us battling against reducing or thinking about being more healthy. The environmental, like we were talking about, the smell of food, the shops, the partners, or the chocolate drawers in the office, habit. For a lot of people now, if as an example, if I say to my other half, "Oh, let's go for a walk," "Oh, let's go there. There's a really nice cafe where we can get a cake and a coffee afterwards." What happened to you used to take a bottle of water with you? It's also tempting and it's also costly. Cravings. Cravings are really, really biggie because it's very hard to not react to a craving. If somebody really wants that bar of chocolate, nothing's going to work. And it's better to think, well, actually, I'm going to have that bar of chocolate. And again, the marketing strategies. If you go into a supermarket, you buy their average size bar of chocolate, and you're talking perhaps 85p, but for £1 or £1.10, you can have a double bar. And so people tend to want their value for money and not think about the health side of it, think about the value for money. Now, when we're thinking about physical triggers, for a lot of people, that can be either thirst, hunger, shaky, fatigue, low levels of sleep, and hormones. Now, our body's really great at alerting us to when we're thirsty. So we think, oh, I really need a drink. Our body will let us know if we're hungry, and we'll look at the hunger scale a bit later on. Shaky. Well, that obviously that there's something going on. Sometimes your blood sugars are saying, I need something. I haven't been fed regularly today. I've gone too long without something. And fatigue, there's a lot of connection between fueling our gut to give us good brain health. The hormones that go on and do their work without us really knowing anything about them. If we're feeling really tired, it could be that we're lacking in certain vitamins, minerals, or or nutrients. Low level sleep. Well, we know that leptin, ghrelin, and cortisol, which are all hormones, can impact on our sleep, and hormones and our hormones that will actually complicate whether we're feeling hungry, whether we're feeling full, and they can trigger different sensors. So there's really quite a lot to think about in that way that we're not really conscious of. And thoughts and feelings, that's a biggie, isn't it, for everybody? Boredom, stress, feeling angry, feeling down, lonely, and then some people they'll feel that they've let themselves down because they've had a bit of something unhealthy, or they've ate more than they wanted to, and then they'll feel guilt. So there's lots of triggers going on sometimes that we're not really acknowledging. We know that they're there, they're just pinging away sometimes. But all these are the factors into mindful eating. It gets us thinking about, mindful eating is when we start to think about all these things and how they affect us and how they sometimes prevent our journey to either lose weight or to eat healthier being successful. Everybody okay? Because we're going to move on now to the hunger scale. And just before we play it, it can be a really good, useful tool for people. And it's very simple and it's easy to think about. When you're preparing food, when you're eating food, when you need food, when to stop eating food, help us to think when we've had enough. and help us to understand how it takes evidence supports that it takes around 15 to 20 minutes for our brain to register that we have a full stomach. And even sometimes when we don't think that we're full, if we sort of pause and eat a bit slower than we usually do, you can start feeling that you feel quite comfortable and full due to that time delay. And if we wait a little longer, then you feel a little fuller. But it's only a minute long. So just have a little look and we'll talk about it after. So anybody got any questions or want to share with us what they thought of that? So I guess what it's telling us is if we're at one, we're, running at if we think about the car, we're running at the bottom of the tank. Or we need something to help us, um, get some of that energy that we're going to need. We're going to need to fuel ourselves. If we think of number 10, that's probably, if anybody can relate to this, I'm not sure everybody will, but I certainly can. Christmas Day, we're having our Christmas lunch, and you can't possibly fit anything else in. And then somebody mentions who wants the Viennetta, who wants the Christmas pudding, who wants the Black Forest Gatto, anybody want cream with it? And you think, oh yeah, I could just manage a little bit. And then you think, well, actually, I'm just going to close my eyes for an hour now. So that's number 10. What we really want to encourage people to be doing is think about where they are between 5 and 7. Because if we're between 5 and 7, our body's going to be happy. We're going to have a healthy inside and feel happy outside. It's going to help us to really sort of balance our nutritional needs so that our body can function in a way that it's meant to function. We all know what it's like to have to rush around sometimes. Our work sometimes means that we've got to grab and go when we're, out driving around or stopping off at seeing different people or visiting different venues. So it may be good to always have some low calorie, low sugar snacks in your car that you can eat going along. But it's just this is just to give you an idea that over the next maybe few days when you're thinking about what you're eating, just identifying some of the difference of how you feel. If you're somebody that misses breakfast, at what number does your body start saying to you, it's time now, I need something to eat? Or are we trying to sort of fill up on coffees or cups of teas. It's really hard sometimes. But again, this is what we're all about today. We're thinking about the side of mindful eating. So any comments on that? No? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just take a look at thoughts and feelings. So the whys and whens about how sometimes we can sabotage ourselves. It can be hard. We all know that stress is a biggie. Stress is one of the, I would say, one of the most reasons really why people reach for something that's going to bring them a bit of comfort in the moment. And so we're just going to think about looking at the emotional eating diary that's on the screen at the moment. It gives us, we'll just talk through the example. So the example it's given us, and I'm sure some people may be able to relate to it in some way. So it's a Monday evening after work, as you can see, and we're looking at the trigger now and what happened to affect the mood. Somebody's had a bit busy, stressful day at work. I'm sure none of you ever experienced that, so you may not be able to relate to this because I'm sure you all go home very happy and nothing's happened to make you stressed. But one of the colleagues, was off sick, and you were given their workload, and then nobody felt very grateful for that, and the boss seemed annoyed with this person. So what thoughts and feelings come up around that? So your head's buzzing, I can't cope with the pressure, I'm feeling angry, undervalued and worthless, really stressed, I don't want to go back tomorrow. So what would that cause somebody to think about or feel like? So on the way home, stopped at the local shops, bought a big bar of chocolate and ate it in the car. And in that moment, it probably really helped. Ashamed, weak, pathetic. I've let myself down. I've broken my plan now. No matter what's the point of continuing for the week? And this can be quite common in how sort of one bad moment can get people thinking, and feeling quite low. So then what we're looking at here is how we could perhaps try and think differently about this situation. Um, Understandable, giving yourself some compassion, that it was understandable that you felt stressed at work because, you were treated unfairly. But then there's ways of making yourself feel better, either by speaking to family or friends about it, stopping somewhere nice on the way home to pause and think, going for a walk in the fresh air. And just because you've slipped on your plan doesn't mean that you need to give up completely. Sometimes that's one of the hardest things to do because in the moment it doesn't feel like those are the alternatives you want to do because you're really upset. But on reflection, what you're doing is you're giving yourself that compassion to think, well, actually, when I think mindfully, I can react in a different way. And if you think about what we're talking about today, being mindful, we're thinking about mindful eating. But whenever we're mindful about how we're reacting to something or how something's affecting us, it can help us make better choices. And when we're specifically looking at around eating, that can actually just help you to find other ways and feel better faster. So how could this make a difference? So if you remember when this person acted, really quickly and felt all those negative feelings, what could have made a difference if they'd have thought about it and responded differently, and made different choices was I wouldn't go for the chocolate. I could have thought about how best to address my problem at work, assertively. This would make it less likely that I would react to the pain and would have felt more in control. So it's about sometimes understanding and just trying to put that pause in between our reaction to actually, if you're, when you're, this person's stressed when they leave work, then they're stressed that they've reacted in that way. So it's just trying to help us to think about the whys and the when and how we can regulate our emotions to help us even choose something. I mean, choose something different to eat so that we feel more satisfied. If we've got hobbies or we've got interests or we've got people we can talk to when we get home, that's a really good way of de-stressing. Everybody happy there? Anybody want to share anything?
We had one comment about food and alcohol around like what could you do differently in the moment to tackle these emotions, like maybe not going for that potentially, or that might be the trigger.
Okay, so obviously again it there would be more we'd need to think about the whole situation. We'd have to think about your environment. We could think about what you would usually reach for and think about making a small swap so that if you use whatever it is, you, one of the other things that accompanies the mindful eating is the habits we get into. So for a lot of people, they've already got those established habits. So it might be recognizing what you already reach for, and then it no longer works for some people. And I'm just going to use an example of somebody's had a stressful day, they go home, they open the bottle of wine, they have their glass of wine and they feel better. Now there's lots of things that accompany that. You're in your safe place. You're going to your go-to habit that helps you feel better. So it's about trying to really open up options of what other things you could do. So you'd have to look at generally everything, what type of alcohol are you going for? Is there a way of having something that's non-alcoholic? If you're choosing foods, if you're going to have chocolate bars that you can get to, or foods that are high in calories, could you have a box where there are less calories in that box in a chocolate bar? Just trying to, and you can't do it all at once. It's a very slow process. If somebody likes a family-sized chocolate bar of an evening, why not make a swap to an ordinary size bar of Maltesers? So you still feel you're having that, you're still having something, but you're making a healthier choice.
I suppose it's like not having the bottle of wine, it's having like one glass of wine, like Michelle's just said in the group chat. It's looking at different ways in which, if you still want that thing, just reducing it, like you've just said, Sandra, and looking at that healthier change that we might be able to do as well.
Yeah, and it a bit like when people like full fat, full sugar. I always call them full fat drinks, but full sugar drinks. It's very hard to make the transition to if you like your, original Coca-Cola, Pepsi. It's very hard because somebody will say, I couldn't possibly drink the sugar-free one. If you buy 4 bottles and take all the labels off, or get somebody to do that for you, and see if you can make a transition over to the sugar-free one. So what about if somebody's, depending on what they're, if it's wine, how about maybe having a wine with some tonic, making it a longer drink, making it a little bit more special. Change, just making a small swap, or doing something differently. Sometimes that can help, but it's very hard to make a change. If change was easy, we would be able to do things very differently across the board. And I think sometimes a sweet treat, I eat marshmallows, which helps, yes. And again, if you think about, if you're recognizing when you're reaching for these things, it's really mindful to set yourself a bit of a challenge and go through almost like the emotional eating diary, which we could send you out a blank one. The emotional eating diary, to see what it is for you. So you could adapt, the headings to fit in with whatever you're trying to change or trying to do differently in order to manage your emotions. So for instance, in order to change something, I think you really need to try and recognize what it is you've got into the habit of doing, and then think about what could you swap to make a change into you doing that. So it sounds quite complicated, and I think that's where a lot of people find it does take effort. And sometimes when we're all tired, when we're all stressed, when we've got a busy family, a busy routine, busy schedule at work, it's very, very hard to think about yourself and implementing all those things. So it really can be, if you need that sweet treat, have a sweet treat. If you look at your food choices, if you're having a packet of crisps and a glass of wine, just look at, is there some crisps you can eat that are less calories, less fat, cooked in a different way? Just really making it connect to you and your lifestyle and your environment. We've all got busy routines in different ways at home. Some people may be caring for elderly relatives, some people may have young families, somebody may be a shift worker. So there's lots of things that come in to really complicate how we make a change. But if we can identify making a change and how that would work for us, that can really help. And of course, if we're thinking about making a change, what we're doing is we're being mindful that something is not working as it is. So we're going to do it a little bit differently. So just moving on. So here we've got some ideas. And do people feel these are the sort of ideas they could implement into their lifestyles, their current lifestyles, to sort of look at what you could do differently when we're thinking about how we eat?
I've found meal planning is really good. So the plan ahead and stick to the regular meal times sort of thing. Because I was notorious for missing lunch and then ravenous when I got home from work. So I'd snack while I'm making dinner, if that makes sense. So I found meal planning and making sure that I stick to certain times and making sure I schedule lunch breaks, for example, within my day is really important.
Can I just ask, does anybody on the session today plan ahead? Do they devise their sort of shopping lists to fit in with the meal plan that they've made for the week?
We've got a couple of in the chat bar, bear with. So Sophie said, I meal prep my meals on a Sunday night. Another one said, Lisetta said, I try to, but the kids eat a lot of my food as well. So that's I suppose that's helpful in one way, but also helpful not a way when you're also trying to eat your own food.
Yeah, that can be quite difficult, quite challenging, can't it?
Yeah.
But
Lissette's
it
also
can,
said that she tries not to buy lots of snacks, so it's not an option to eat the bad stuff at home. And Michelle said that her husband is retired, so he cooks and he does try to keep it healthy.
yeah, and so it sounds like even with the the best thought through plans, we can all still find things that sort of come in to prevent us from being able to stay on track with our meal planning. If we just think about some of the headings that we can see at the moment, slowing down eating. So, how do people feel about that? Because slowing eating can, like we saw from the hunger scale, can allow us to recognize as it's getting full. And this is because your stomach has taken enough food and a hormone called leptin is released from fat tissues, which sends signals to the brain to let us know it's full. We are full. It's thought, however, that it takes about 20 minutes for this process to occur. What do people think about 20 minutes when you're eating a meal? Because when you're living in a very busy household, 20 minutes of being able to, to sit down and eat mindfully for 20 minutes seems like quite a challenge to me. How do other people feel about that?
I think if you've only got a 30-minute lunch break, for a lot of people do have, and it takes 20 minutes for your brain to register you're starting to get full, you're just wolfing food down and then you get back on the job. And food is just something there, isn't it? It's just something there. You eat it, you crack on with your job, and then if you start to slow down again about halfway through the afternoon, say after your lunch, you start to get hungry again because you're slowing down, and half the time my brain's not registered I've eaten something. It's I'm just like I'm stuck in traffic thinking I'm bored, I'm on a Mars bar.
And when you're in that process of thinking, what's the first thing that comes into your mind is food.
Yeah.
And it's good. Just going back to one of the comments that came in earlier about the van that comes into the workplace. If sometimes when you're out and about and you be a bit more observant, especially sort of after attending a session like this, it gets you thinking, especially for a little while after. You think, if somebody's woke up and thought, oh, I'm going to make a real effort to get more active. So they go into the life centre for their swim. What's the first thing you see? The cafe. What's the first thing you smell? The cheesy chips. It's already alerted you that you're going to do your swim. You're going to burn all those calories and be really active. But what's driving you on is knowing that you're coming out for a bowl of cheesy chips after. It's how our brains are geared up, isn't it? Like you're saying, when you're stuck in traffic, we know you've eaten that day, or I've eaten that day, but we're thinking, oh, what can we have to eat when we get home? What have I got? There's lots of things that sabotage us, and we don't seem to connect that eating to fuel ourselves. So, for instance, for a lot of people, they get up very early in the morning. If they're able to manage a bowl of cereal and a cup of tea, that's great. You know, lots of people feel a healthy cereal has to involve overnight oats, chia seeds, fruit and, you know, strawberries. You know, keep it simple, keep it plain, give our body what it's asking for. But yes, it is very, very hard. And again, what I'm hoping today from today's session, it'll just sort of set you all thinking to recognize, not change anything right away, just recognize what you're currently doing and think about maybe, yes, what can I do to, you know, slow down when I'm eating? Avoid distractions. You know, lots of people eat when they're on their laptop, when they're on their phone, when they're reading, when they're watching television. You know, there's a lot of multitasking going on sometimes. You know, we may have the telly on, but we're still on our iPads, we're still on our phones, and then we're, you know, we'll have just I think I'll have a biscuit with a cup of tea, and before you've known it, you've gone through half the packet because we're distracted. It's really easy to be distracted. And so if we think about, well, actually, I've not really noticed if I'm distracted. If we start thinking about it, and identifying what we all do in practice, it can really help us to find ways of fueling ourselves more healthily. Another, obviously, another one is to listen to your body. You know, recognizing, are we hungry, or, you know, do we want something to eat because we're thinking about food? And like you were saying, we get that 30 minutes for our lunch. Well, that's soon gone. We've eaten it, and then we're right back doing what we're doing. So where have we had time then to be mindful about what we're eating, to appreciate every mouthful, to think about, you know, it's our time now to sit down and relax and have a meal. We're already thinking about our next task probably at the end of our lunch break. So it does make it very, very hard. Sometimes it is all in the planning, and the planning can be the hardest bit. You know, it may be sometimes that if, just for instance, you do your shopping on a Saturday, you do a meal plan for the next 5 days, and you know on your shopping list you're going to have everything in there and commit to cooking. And that's great because you've got your plan, but that's more likely to work in a household where there's not very many people. Because we know for people that live with teenagers or they have to support other family members, there's a lot of different choices that are needed. One person wants to eat one thing, one person wants to eat another, and somebody might be vegetarian and somebody might be gluten-free. So there's lots of things that can sabotage it. But if we start to plan and we start to think about food in a mindful way, we can implement changes to routine to help us eat more healthily. And I think sometimes when we eat something and then we're thinking, oh, I mean, I know I've done it. I thought, oh, I've had nothing to eat all day. And then you come in and you grab whatever's on offer, and then suddenly you think, oh yeah, I had that. Oh yeah, and I forgot I'd had that. So it's about really trying to enjoy what you're eating when you're eating it, so that you can sort of rationalize with yourself that, am I hungry? Well, I shouldn't be, because I should have eaten enough to keep me going for a bit. And don't forget, sometimes we reach for those sugar spikes that are not going to be, they're not going to sustain us for very long. They're going to, probably just fix us in the moment. And then that'll wear off, and then we'll be looking for something else. So think about the foods that you currently eat and what sort of food you could eat that might keep you fuller for longer. Any questions?
Just finishing off the questions that were in the chat bar. Michelle said she's going to try try that, and then also eat at the table and not on my lap watching TV. And I think this would be better, as I can actually then slow down and talk to one another as a family.
And and that sounds like a great plan, but you've got to sell it to your family as well. So it could be that you just do that one day a week to start with. So it can be we're going to talk more on a Tuesday. This Tuesday's going to be our evening where we switch the telly off and we just talk about things while we're having our meal. Because we all know if we want to go in and make a change and we change things too quickly, that can leave people feeling a little bit sort of find it difficult to address the change. Whereas if we just suggest, let's just as an idea, try something, and perhaps just do it one evening, or on a Wednesday, I'm going to drink more water. Try and bring something in very gradually, because you have more chance of success then of being able to sustain it and making it a lifelong change, rather than just a quick fix that's not going to be sustainable.
Michelle said it's just her and her husband, so she thinks that he would be up for that.
Brilliant. Yeah, and it's always worth trying something different, because if we don't try, things will continue the same. Whereas if we try something different, what's the worst that can happen? It's just not going to work. So then, we think of a different way. So it sounds like a really good plan. Anybody else thinking of anything they might do differently?
Sorry.
My wife and I, a little while ago, we changed when we do the shopping, because we'd finish work, go straight to the shops before the school kicked out, so we wouldn't have hordes of kids running around wanting their sweets in, giving me a headache and things like that. But also, when you do that, you're going up there and your shopping plan goes out the window because you're hungry, and the donuts are looking lovely, and you're thinking, oh look, I'll have a steak for my dinner, and I'll push the boat out, and you haven't got the money for a steak because you spent it on a pasty and things like that. So now we deliberately go and do our food shop after we've eaten, and it's amazing how much money you save, because you just don't buy rubbish.
That's an amazing change. But it's happened through you identifying something you could implement that would make things better. And that's what needs to happen. And when we do our shop, I think sometimes we don't always take into consideration how clever the marketing skills are of the people that organize the shop floors in the supermarkets. So when we start off, you've got your clothes, or you've got your gardening stuff, then you come to your basic necessary food, your milk, your bread, your sustainables, your fresh stuff. Now, you've been looking at this food all the way around, and just as you come into the end, you come through the chocolates, the biscuits, the crisps, the crackers, the peanuts, and they sort of design this so that you're feeling more hungry by the time you reach those areas, and you're more likely to be tempted to sort of reach for those. Oh yeah, we'll have that while we're in the car going home. And I think, if we're drivers on the session, if you go into a garage, the chocolates and the donuts are all on the way, very near to the till, and they're just looking at you, and you think, oh, I'll just have one of those while I'm waiting. It's easily done. There's not one rule for all, but another good thing that I did for myself is I decided for a whole month, if I bought a grab and go meal, or a bottle of Coke, or a bar of chocolate, I'd put the receipt in a jar, and at the end of the month I'd add up all the receipts. And like you were saying, when you recognize the invisible money on these unhealthy snacks, or whatever you're buying, it's amazing. It's quite frightening sometimes because you don't recognize, how much you can spend in that way. So we've covered lots of things today.
Sorry, Sandra. Michelle's got her hand up.
Oh, hi, Michelle.
Hi. As you were saying about planning the meals for the week, I think that's a really good idea. And I think by doing that, you can save yourself a lot of money, because my husband will go down the local co-op every day or every other day to buy whatever we're going to have for tea. So I think as he's walking around, he picks up other bits like, cheesecake or something like that for afters. Of course, because he has it, I have it. And, I am the sort of person that's quite strong-willed and can say no to sweets and stuff. But then I feel guilty if I say no because he's bought it. But I think planning your meals ahead for every day of the week would save you a lot of money.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michelle. That's a really good point. And when we're thinking about, mindful eating, and we spoke about our triggers and some of the things that can sabotage us. How many of us will say, oh, do you want an ice cream? And somebody will say, well, are you having one? And then you feel obliged to say yes, because you don't want to eat it on your own, and they'll only say yes if you're having one. So there's always pressure, isn't there? So Michelle, I totally get where you're coming from, um, and maybe, sometimes having that conversation around, well, actually, if you're going shopping, I'm really fancying X, Y, and Z tonight instead of a cheesecake. So, try and break it down a little bit like that. Because it is very hard, and it's saying no to foods doesn't come easy for anybody, I think, because we are only human, and we do like our foods, and food is a part of our lives. We need to eat, but it's about thinking about in moderation what we can do to make our meals a little bit healthier and a little bit perhaps less stressful. I mean, if you take, for instance, the good old cottage pie, we're getting our protein in the mince, we're getting our carbs in the potato, if we're having vegetables with it, that's a nice, easy go-to meal. And for some people, we know that some people have to rely on microwave meals. So it's about just being mindful. Am I going for the healthier option, or is this one a bit more unhealthy? Have a little think. But I think if you take one thing away from today's session, I think I'd encourage you to just try and feel a bit more aware of what you're currently doing, to see if there's any ways that you can bring in some small changes to help you as you think about changing things.
I used your receipt idea, funnily enough. I started last December. So at the end of each month, I went through my bank account, and this is just me, on how much I'd spent on takeaways, snacks, and lunches. And I was absolutely gobsmacked about how much I was spending on food. And it was food that, it's not something you remember. A Mars bar here, can of fizzy pop there, a pasty here. So December, it was £309 in December on takeaways, snacks, and lunches. And it slowly started coming down to now where last month it was just over £100. And when you start adding up how much that is over the year, and like you said, when you go for a meal, you genuinely remember that meal. It's a nice meal. Yeah, it costs you a bit of money. Steak and omelette bar isn't as cheap as it used to be. But you don't really remember that Chinese takeaway you had on the 13th of last month. but you will remember that nice meal. And I was just gobsmacked at how much money I'm spending, and that's not including my wife. So that worked for me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, because, you know, I mean, we're talking about mindful eating, but all these things come into play. It gets us thinking about what we're currently doing, and what can we do to make a change. And for some people, they feel the change needs to be you know, all at once, and that can be so complicated for people, so stressful for people. And it's just about, you know, even if you make one day a week that you don't buy anything different than you're shopping at, you know, it's just about what works for you. And as individuals, we will find our niche. We will find what works for us, and what works for one may not work for another. But Kate's put in, I've been doing no spend days as much as I can, because all the snacks do add up and takeaways. I'm trying to eat things out of the cupboard I forget are there. Yeah, so I mean that's a really good bit of advice, really. How many of
It was
us?
meant to say takeaway coffees, because I go out with patients quite a lot, and it adds up. It's £4 a time normally, isn't it? And I was just like, I can't do this anymore, because you're like, oh my God, just for a coffee. And most of the time it's not even nice. So yeah, I consciously try and think, oh, well, I could take snacks with me, or like take healthy things with me. And I'm trying to lose weight as well as save money. So it definitely helps. And it's a bit of an achievement to be like, oh, I've not spent any money today.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that with us, because again, it's not just the cost. If you think of the calories, if you think of how that's impacting, you know, however many days a week, however many coffees you are having, if you look to see how many calories that can work out to in a week, you'd probably be quite surprised and a little shocked, because unless you specifically ask for the skinny latte or something, you'd be surprised at how many calories, extra calories, can be consumed in that way. But again, it's just that convenience, isn't it? And sometimes when we're filling up on our coffees, especially if they're milky coffees, we're not really feeling hungry enough to eat in a more controlled way. So yeah, you know, there's a suggestion there to swap coffees to save calories. Try coconut or almond milk. You know, have the alternatives, or think about where you're going to have that coffee and what you can have as you know, obviously, if you can take something, that's going to be less cost. You know, if you can take a bottle of water or a drink with you, that would be better. Just moving on then. Our next slide looks at if you felt that you needed any further support after this session today, because sometimes it can be a bit triggering psychologically for people. So we've given you some options and some links. We've got the Mind Devon courses. They sort of run courses on trauma, shame, and self-care, and understanding and coping with anxiety, understanding emotions, and focus on anger. We've got Andy's main clubs for the men that are amongst us, should they need any further help and support. And please do, you know, stay on the call when we're finished. And if you've got any questions, or you feel that you'd like a one-to-one at any time, that would be absolutely fine. So some of the other things we offer are our wellness walks. We've got a ladies only walk that happens on a Thursday evening. I don't know if you're all aware of that. And for the gentleman that's amongst us, or I'm not sure how many gentlemen we've got on the call, to be honest, I can't see. We do some lovely walk and talk sessions. So if you're fancying some company and you want to get a bit of exercise in, come along. And thank you for your time. And I hope you won't need 2 paracetamols for a headache after this.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That was
Yeah, thank
really
you, Sandra.
that was really informative.
Thank
It's the first
you.
time I've seen that presentation as well, so it was brilliant. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being so engaging and interacting during this session as well, because it makes it a lot easier for Sandra as a facilitator to have interaction as well. But yeah, so the information that Sandra's spoken about will be sent out in our follow-up email with the links as well that Sandra has spoken about. We will also add in the mindful eating planner that Sandra mentioned, just so you guys can have a look at it as well at the same time. This is a space now if you do want to share anything that's going on within your organizations, if you need any help with anything in particular as well, because I do know that I probably haven't seen a lot of you for a little while, but if you also do just want to actually have a one-to-one, then do just feel free to email me. I will pop my email in the chat bar, but I'm sure most of you have probably got it already. And we just want to make sure that you guys know that we are here to support you. There's been a bit of a change to some of our programme to do with the Wellbeing at Work Awards. So there's a new legislation coming into place for organisations around menopause, where it's going to be a legal requirement that they have a menopause policy. So we're doing a lot of work around updating all of our resources around that. So there'll be new resources that will be sent out, and I think it's really relevant for what's going on at the moment. We are also working with NPEN, which is the neurodiversity Plymouth network, around adding neurodiversity support within our organisations as well. So these will all be new things that as champions you can access if you feel like you would like to. Like Sandra just said, we've got sessions with our Healthy Lifestyles programme, which involves walks and talks. So similar to what Sandra's spoken about today, we also look at sleep, we look at alcohol, we look at other areas which affect our healthy lifestyle that we're trying to live. And it all links around the triggers that Sandra was talking about as well today. Does anybody have anything that they would like to bring up in the forum? Some shakes, lovely. But other than that, I will say goodbye to you then. There will be a feedback form sent out to you. Please do give us feedback. Let us know if you want what sort of topics you want in these network sessions. If you do want anything from me, feel free to email me, please, because I am here to help. And I know, as I say in all the training sessions, if you don't talk to me, then I have nothing to do. So do make sure that you're filling my time. But other than that, I will leave you on this very wet Thursday afternoon. And hopefully you guys have a lovely weekend when it comes around. Thank you so much for today.